a member, I gather, of the Ukrainian Canadian Servicemen Association.
Yes.
Can you tell us about the formation of this association or this club, and about your activities in this association?
Well, it first started with Gordon Panchik, John Music, and Steve Cullen, if I remember right. And they got together and decided that they should do something, because when troops have leave, the first place they want to go is to London, and there is no place to stay for them. So the first gathering they had, they'd also found out that there were Ukrainians in Manchester. So the first gathering they had it in Manchester. And then from there on, they got hold of more, and you know, news spreads. The grapevine is terrific, and was terrific in the service. We just found out who was Ukrainian, where they were, and that's how it started. And then, of course, was to get a building in London. Very fortunately, we got a building that was a church residence in Paddington. And it was very close to Hyde Park, and it was really very close to Marble Arch, which is really center of the town. And then Fund agreed to it, because they'd have to finance it. They'd have to pay the rent before we sort of started to get going. And
so
then
who was paying the rent? Who would be paying the rent?
Ukrainian Canadian Relief Fund.
The Relief Fund.
Oh, yes. And then we had to, the building was empty. We had to look around for furniture. And being wartime, wasn't easy to buy anything. There just wasn't anything to buy anywhere. So Gordon arranged with a British ministry for me to go around and see if I can buy some furniture. So I had to go out quite a bit out of London. I was able to round up enough beds, and then also we had some furniture made for us too. And then the people from Canada, see, all that started being appeared in the Ukrainian press. They started sending us blankets and the sheets, because we didn't have that, towels. And they really the ones that supplied that. But the British supplied us with mattresses and pillows.
Were you buying those from the British?
We had to buy that, yes.
So where would you find them? In private homes, or
no.
anywhere? Or?
Well, the ministry gave quite a few addresses, locations where you could buy them.
And the president of this association was Mr. Panchuk?
Yes.
Can you tell us anything about his personality?
Well, he was very dedicated. He gave his life to it, and he gave his life really to the Ukrainian cause.
How was he as a person?
Very nice to work with, and a very hard worker. There were nights when he'd come in on a weekend when he was free. He'd work all night, never went to bed.
Do you remember Mr. Frolic, or Frolic as they call him in Canada?
Well, he came over about 1944 with UNRWA, and he stayed at the club. And then very shortly he went to the continent when they started rounding up the displaced persons and signing him into camps. And then he was back, and I don't know whether he got out of UNRWA or just quit, and he stayed on, and he actually stayed on. He's quite active in Ukrainian
politics.
Politics, yes.
But he was not himself a serviceman.
No.
He was not a member of the association.
Not to the best of my knowledge. And then in October of '46, Ukrainian Canadian Relief Fund sent four of us, Mr. and Mrs. Panchik, Tony Armorich, and myself, as a relief mission to the continent. So we went from Canada to London, and the service club has been turned over as the Ukrainian Relief Bureau.
I see.
And then from there on, were assigned to our duties on the continent.
So you were going to help the displaced persons
Yes, that's
in
right.
Germany especially.
And with any kind of assistance that we could give them. At that time, it was very difficult to give much assistance because UNRWA was still there, and they're the ones, all they believed in is really repatriation back to Russia. We were only long enough in Britain, it took some time though, for us to get visas and also to get permission to go to the occupied countries, because you see, civilians couldn't go in. We had to get permission from the British Foreign Office to go to the British zone. Also had to get American permission to go to the American zone, and the French. But then and that took quite a bit of time to arrange all that. And then once that was arranged, I was assigned to Frankfurt in the American zone, and my area was Frankfurt, the French zone, and the American zone of Austria. Tony was assigned the British zone, and Gordon stayed in London and kept contact with UNRWA, and also at that time when UNRWA was almost finished and taken over by the International Relief Organization. The exact dates I can't tell you, I can't remember that. And that was really his job. And the first help that we were able to give there is that fund in Winnipeg had collected quite a bit of clothing and also purchased a lot of food, and particularly for children, such things as cod liver oil and pablum. And then it was a whole shipload that was shipped. And my first assignment was when the supplies came in by ship to Rotterdam, and then from there it went on a barge on the Rhine all the way to Frankfurt on Main. And then it was my job to get a warehousing for it and organize committees from the various camps, and also guards, security guards, because things would have been all stolen. So that when we started to split up all that food, where what camps was going to, you also had to make arrangements for transportation by train. And that took me, weeks to do it. But I had great help there. International Red Cross helped a lot, and also the Jewish World Congress. But at that time, there were no other organizations in Germany except the Jewish World Congress. That's all, and UNRWA, and us Ukrainians. See, the American Ukrainian committee didn't come in until, I think, 47. And you know, you never thought of such a thing as inconvenience, no lights at night, everything dark, and then when there's an air raid you couldn't sleep. You never thought anything about it, never. And if you didn't have the food that you like, you just ate it because it was there. It just went by, you never cared. It was really surprising.
Do you find that in that sort of circumstances you value life itself much more than...
Oh yes, and you're terribly proud of your country. Oh, you'll never forget it.
And perhaps my last question then to you would be, how would you look back now at the participation of Ukrainians in the Canadian Army? do you think that was an important? Do you think they've made an important contribution to the war effort?
Oh, yes, it did. We had over 40,000 Ukrainian Canadians.
40,000?
Yes, in the service. And that's a heck of a lot. And another thing, when we came back, then all the Ukrainians were able really to hold their heads high, and it was recognized.
So, would you say, therefore, that what is the most important consequence of that Ukrainian participation in the war, in the Canadian Army, in the war? Would it be that it has that participation increased the Ukrainian prestige in Canada?
Oh yes, very much so, very much so. Because before that, I'll tell you an incident. When I was drafted to go overseas, I was called into the office to tell me that I was on draft, and I was told, I do not want to hear you speak Ukrainian.
I see. So there was some discrimination.
Oh yes. And then when we came back, it was a different thing altogether. Ukrainians are being recognized, which before the war, it was a different story.
I see.
My brother was in the university, and he wanted to join the cadets. And when they found out his name, Chraplywa, no dice. You see, it was very different than to what it is now. Now we're, regardless of what ethnic origin you are from, you are a Canadian. That wasn't like that before.
So you would say that this would be the most important consequence, perhaps, or that Ukrainians somehow gained respect.
Well, the contribution that the servicemen gave during the war certainly helped an awful lot for Ukrainians to be recognized.